amen moment, and they were happy that Governor Romney had said it. Now he's saying that the remarks were wrong. Where do you stand? Do you believe him now, or were you one of the ones who applauded the initial comment?
I think you got to give him credit. I mean, he owned up to it, and he apologized for it, and he took it back. I think that he's right, though, that when you have when you're on the campaign and you're making literally thousands of stops over the course of 18 months, 2 years, that you just by the rule of statistics, you're going to say stuff that's wrong. I mean, look at what Obama said in 2008 when he talked about people clinging to their guns and religions. I mean, that was something that was deeply offensive to literally tens of millions of people all across the country, and he tried to take it back, but people still took offense to it because it was an offensive remark. I think you have to give Romney some credit for owning up to it and then taking it back.
Okay, but some of the analysis is that he has now admitted these remarks were wrong because he needs to move away from the far right. That initially there were people like Eric Erickson, folks on Red State, who again said that these remarks, the initial remarks, were spot on. He has completely now moved away from the remarks saying, the governor has, saying that they were not just inartful, they were wrong. So I guess my specific question is he shifting from the far right by now saying they were completely wrong comments, not inartful, but wrong?
I don't know that I agree with the assumption of the question that he was ever on the far right. I mean, this is Mitt Romney we're talking about. I mean, there were 3 major candidates in the Republican primary who were running to his right. So I don't accept the assumption that he was some kind of far right guy. I think that what he said, credit him for making a very, very clear statement, for retracting what he said. And now I think it's time to move on and talk about different things.
Well, Ann, I didn't say that Governor Romney has gone to the far right because we know that's not the case. But the talking point that there were people in this country who wanted to live off of entitlement and did not want to get out and work, that had been floated around on some of the conservative websites and had been touted for some time. I think that I've made myself clear on that. But the bottom line is the governor now shifting and moving away by saying flat out, I was wrong about this? Does this make amends for what has happened over the last 3 weeks?
Well, it's hard to interpret it any other way, I think. But what's so curious is why 3 weeks later? If what he believed is that the statement was wrong, if he thought it was something he shouldn't have said, that seems like a pretty obvious thing to know the next morning after you've heard about it, or maybe 3 or 4 days later, or maybe even a week later once you've seen what the polling is. The 3-week gap, I think, is what is so curious. In some ways, you could interpret it as his having gotten praise from the right initially and thinking, okay, this isn't going to be so bad, and then over time seeing what some of the numbers are and changing his mind about that. But we haven't actually gotten an explanation out of the campaign about what that time delay is about.
So, Jonathan, do you reject the notion that he got praise initially by some on the right and maybe that wasn't enough to get him through when he looks at the numbers for a general election? Is this the etch-a-sketch moment his senior advisor said? Again, that would happen. Those are not my words. That came from his senior advisor at the time.
No, I mean, I think the candidates, in any context, will say things that they regret. I mean, just look at President Obama and the ad that his super PAC ran, basically calling Mitt Romney responsible for the death of the woman. They were asked to criticize that ad, and they still haven't done it. I mean, that's been months.
Tamron,
there are always cases of this with candidates.
David?
Tamron, here's the critical issue. Americans feel like they're getting a window into someone's soul when something they blurt out actually conforms with maybe something we were suspecting about this person. So we opted that Mitt Romney had this sort of disdain for the working class, for the middle class, and sure enough, that quote came out and proved it to us. We always had the suspicion that Mitt Romney was just an empty suit and would change his stripes in whatever way was necessary to win, and sure enough, the 3 weeks later tells us that this is not sincere.
But he says it was wrong, David. I guess the point is now he's saying that it is wrong. As he's shifted, for example, in some respects, kind of back and forth, though, in health care, saying, of course, he would repeal Obamacare, and he said no disrespect for that, but also not very, a couple of days before the debate, embracing that he was the godfather of Obamacare. The larger issue is, with Mitt Romney now coming out saying, I was wrong, does that help him reset his campaign? You say no. Go ahead.
Right. I say no because he's looking more and more like a shapeshifter, which is precisely the stereotype that people have somewhere in their minds held about him, including people on the right, that you don't really know who the real Mitt Romney is. And so by doing this, it's sort of like he's inflicting 1,000 cuts on himself. This constant movement and bobbing and weaving does not help him recover the gap in the polls that he has right now when it comes to likability or trustability.
And Ann, let me get you in part of the afterglow, if you will. In Virginia, Governor Romney was with Congressman Ryan there, and they had the fireworks. I mean, it reminded me of when the Republicans would criticize the Democrats for having those pillars, remember, at the last Democratic National Convention. Quite a beautiful sight, but even our own Chuck Todd and our First Read team noted that that image alone could look like, you still have a few more debates to go.
Well, I think that's right. Now, look, I think the Romney campaign knows that they don't want to be seen as too over the top, either in their own comments or their exuberance or, the fireworks, which I suspect they weren't trying to suggest that this was the
game over, right? Absolutely not. Sure.
But still, look, they were having a moment to celebrate, and if the shoe were on the other foot, I'm sure President Obama would be taking heat for it. I suspect we're not going to see fireworks shooting up at the end of the vice presidential debate or the next presidential debate, but they had a nice moment in Virginia yesterday.
You don't know. We might have different kind of fireworks with Vice President Joe Biden, which so many people are saying now. Democrats are concerned of whether or not he will help or hurt. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We've got a lot of time for that. Thank you all for your time. Have a great weekend, David, Ann, and Jonathan. It's a great pleasure, as always. Coming up,
Thank you.
An update on the ongoing voter ID battle. This one